This week, we are joined by Jake Ring as we discuss the lost and forgotten waterfalls of the Western Upper Peninsula. You are listening to the LAKESCAPE Photography Podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome to the final episode of Season 1 of the LAKESCAPE Photography Podcast. It's been a long journey. It's been an exciting journey. I personally cannot believe that we've already closed out the year, but what better way to do that than with a great friend, great photographer, perfect way to close out Season 1. This week, we're joined by Jake Ring, a landscape photographer from Michigan's Upper Peninsula who has dedicated the better part of the last decade to seeking out and sharing some of the lost and forgotten waterfalls of Michigan's Western Upper Peninsula. In this episode, Jake shares some of his favorite stories of his journey to 1,000 waterfalls and the experiences that went into the making of his newly released book, The Lost and Forgotten Waterfalls of Michigan's Western Upper Peninsula. All photos, resources, and examples are linked in the show notes below. Go ahead and check them out as you enjoy this week's discussion with Jake Ring.
Howdy, thanks for having me. I live in Ironwood, Michigan, and I like finding waterfalls. I like taking pictures of them too, and I'm a drone pilot, so a lot of the times I'm using a drone to do that.
Very cool, man. You got a book that you just released. You've got some milestones along with the book as well.
Yeah, I just saw my 1,000th Upper Peninsula waterfall, which was a lot of fun. And getting to just see new waterfalls every day for weeks and weeks and weeks is not a bad way to spend your time. And then I also have just released Lost and Forgotten Waterfalls of Michigan's Western Upper Peninsula. And it pairs really well with finding all those 1,000 waterfalls. This is kind of a collection of the best ones from those 1,000.
The pictures you've been sharing on Instagram have been something else. I'm very excited to see quite a few that you've included in your book, and just get out there and explore, man. Like you said, the journey to 1,000 waterfalls. Like let's start with that, because I feel like that's the backbone that led to the book and just you sharing your passion for getting out there and wanting to explore. What took you on the journey of 1,000 waterfalls?
In a way, it's what I moved up to Ironwood in the Upper Peninsula for. I had spent a lot of my free weekends driving up when I was still living in Wisconsin, didn't live here. And that kind of helped me realize, oh, wow, this might be a cool place to call home. I'd be a lot closer to these waterfalls, the creeks. And so moving here was, in a way, just being able to see what it's like to go there even after a work day and take pictures of new stuff all the time. And so it probably started when I moved here 8 years ago. And it slowly developed into every time we went out, we were looking for a new creek just because that was a lot of fun. And part of it was realizing how much new stuff there was. Like, you almost have to go see something different every time if you want to scratch the surface with what's out there. So I just every week would look at the map and pick a place that looked interesting and see what we could find.
I love that. And the fact that you moved up there to specifically pursue that passion and really, I mean, understandably save yourself drive time, but more so have direct access. That's awesome. And looking across maps, resources, you're presumably using topographical maps so that you can find these, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Topography maps, satellite images, whatever really makes the most sense. A lot of the times you can't really necessarily get much from satellite images on little creeks, but sometimes it's just what you can see from those things too. So topo maps for sure, though.
And there's a lot of great resources for those out there. And I know you and I have talked about the topo maps and the different resources and using everything from Google Google Maps satellite view to just picking a random creek and saying, "Hey, this looks like it could have something on it," and walking up it to see what's out there. I mean, you and I have ran into each other on the trails and the Porkies a couple times doing exactly that, just being out there exploring and taking things in. As far as your connection with the creeks and waterways of the UP, I understand that you do have a background in that through your education and other pursuits previous to moving to the Upper Peninsula. Is that right?
Yeah, before I moved to the UP, I was working for Wisconsin DNR doing stream science out of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And that was definitely part of my appreciation and love for creeks. Just getting to go to different ones for my job every day for the field season was a lot of fun. And I was always learning a lot. And even like the adventures now where I might be chasing a photograph instead of a data point, there was always something unique that you didn't really expect out there because you're going to go to 3, 4, 5 creeks in a day. Who knows what you're going to see? And so we had a lot of fun even down in more flatter creeks of Wisconsin.
I spent a lot of time in Wisconsin when I was younger around the Castle Rock Lake area. And I used to do a lot of the same, man. I'd get up there and I'd hike creeks, I'd hike rivers, I'd just walk off into the forest and see what I could find out there. Of course, no formal educational background in anything like that. I just thought it was cool. Found a lot of frogs, that kind of thing, things kids do, but that's awesome. And Wisconsin has some really cool places too. Great place to find inspiration and chase it north.
I could probably spend a couple lifetimes just exploring Wisconsin. Um, there's just so much to see, and who doesn't love walking up a creek, no matter what age you are? So,
right. Yeah. I mean, I'm almost 40 and I'm still loving every second of it. So, and I will continue doing it as long as my body allows.
yeah, exactly. It doesn't get old and there's always something new.
Right. Right. And, one of the things that I'm sure you probably get a lot of questions on as far as exploring and your proficiency in outdoor pursuits. Do you get a lot of questions about like barriers to entry for people, like fear of animals, fear of getting lost, anything like that? How do you manage all that when you're out there so that you can find your way back?
Good question. I get asked a lot if I see animals or bears or cougars or wolves and all that. And, the short answer is no, I really don't. I think a lot of them are really aware of who's around the forest. They're aware of where the trails are. So if you're on a trail, they know that's where people show up. And so I'll see footprints and little bit of maybe one or two of the megafauna every couple of years. But for the most part, I'm not seeing a ton of wildlife. I think they see you first. But sometimes the smaller critters, we'll see like a fisher, a mink, occasionally, maybe once a year or two. But yeah, it's wild how much you don't see when you're covering ground in the forest. I just think everything's also really spread out too. So in terms of getting spun around, though, that'd probably be the biggest risk to walking in the woods would be getting lost.
Yeah, I use Garmin GPS and then I have Gaia on my phone so that I can track where I am, especially once you start getting off trail. If we're going down creeks, rivers, what have you, as I'm sure you're very familiar with, a lot of the places that you have found yourself probably don't have clear trails or designated marked trails per se. So you have to have a way in and a way out to get back there and find these places.
Yeah, and having offline maps, because really you're probably not going to have cell service in the UP, especially if it's steep terrain. And once you get down into the creek and you're in a little canyon, you're out of luck if you need service. So offline maps are really useful, and having a pin to aim for can make it a lot more straightforward and probably save you some mileage too. So I always have that. Even if I don't think I'm going to use it, I download the offline map for the area I'm going to walk, and maybe even a bigger area. Not that I plan to walk any of it, but just in case I screw up.
Yeah. Yeah. Having pins, and that's something that I actually do with my Garmin is I'll mark where I went off trail as a waypoint, either on my Garmin, on my phone, whatever. And then that way I know, hey, I'm going northeast, southwest, whichever, from this point. So if I get turned around, all I have to do is head that cardinal direction back to that point, and it's going to bring me right back to the trail or wherever I decided I was going on an adventure from.
I think that's the right way to do it. And to be honest, if you want to find the waterfalls in my book, you have to do that. The whole utility of it is taking the coordinates I give and plugging them in and seeing where they fall, and then being able to aim for them. So I guess if you can't do that, you might not get to see a lot of the waterfalls in my book either, because they don't have trails. They might have trails for a few miles, and then you have a few more without. So yeah, that's critical to just be able to plug in a little point and aim for that.
And that's a very good precursor for everyone that wants to get out there. And I mean, it's with any waterfall destination, or maybe not even necessarily a waterfall, a overlook, a specific tree, what have you. A lot of those places are going to require you to get a little adventurous. And like you mentioned, the wildlife really isn't that big of a deal. It's more so being able to get there, get back. On your journey to 1,000 waterfalls, was there ever an instance where you just were like, this is it, this is top experience, or just outline your top 3 experiences if that's easier?
There's so many good ones. That's a great question, tricky to narrow down, but I have been thinking about that a little bit more lately, figuring out, okay, which one should I tell people about and show a little reel off today. So one of my favorites I just showed on Instagram recently was the one that I call Wow Creek. And I think if people go there, it makes sense. It's just like jaw dropping. It's waterfall after waterfall. There's a couple 15 footers, a 20 footer, and the lowest downstream one is, gosh, it's over 40 feet, I think. I haven't really measured them to the foot. And the day we went was raining, so I couldn't fly the drone, and I didn't get as many photos either, which it feels ironic that you get to this creek that is jaw dropping and has 10 photogenic waterfalls or whatever, 5, 7. It was a lot. And then with the rain, I didn't really get my camera out as much. Go figure.
I did see your video of Wow Creek, and I'm going to have to link it in the show notes below so you guys listening can go and check it out, because it really is a very cool spot. There's I noticed in the video, there was like that little basin almost that kind of opened up. It looked like it may have been in the middle, but there was like multiple U-shaped falls inside of that creek as it came down from the larger chute above. Definitely one of the ones I want to check out this spring once winter's over and the snow's gone and everything's flowing.
Yeah, it's a great one. And anyone that gets to that one is going to be stoked that they made the effort. That one does have pretty good little bushwhack too, and some trail miles. So it makes you work for it too, which nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all. I mean, the day that you and I ran into each other in June, I was out there. I had hiked from Summit Peak down to Mirror Lake in the Porkies, and I was just kind of wandering around looking to see what I could find. And on that little adventure that I was on, I did get a little bit off trail, and it makes you appreciate it, I feel, when you have to work a little bit for it, when you have to go a little off trail, because when you find it, you have that personal connection of, I set a goal, I decided I was going to do it. Maybe you faced challenges, overcame them, whatever that might look like for everybody, and everybody's going to be different. But when you find those cool spots, in this case, waterfalls, that's such a huge reward for any outdoor enthusiast, I feel.
I think it's great to not really know what you're going to find. You might know you're going to find something, but to have to go find it and then get to come around the bend and see what you're chasing, or what you spent your last few hours walking towards, is one of the best things you can do out in the woods for sure.
Without a doubt, man. And, the variety that you've shown and shared so far on your Instagram page, that just, they all look awesome. And the fact that there's so many to find just over in the western side of the Upper Peninsula, it really puts things into perspective of, sure, I can go to the major waterfalls that are marked in books, marked with signage, what have you. But one of the things that we talk about between you and I and other guests that I've had here on the show is having that personalized adventure. And I think that your book is a direct way to do that. It's, hey, this is a cool spot. Now have your personalized adventure. Go seek it out and enjoy that reward.
And you're not going to have company. They just aren't places that have visitors. And means if you break your ankle or break your leg, no one's going to find you either. So I guess you're kind of on your own in all regards. But it really is a collection of the spots that are yours to enjoy by yourself or with your group. And I like those. I like taking pictures of those too. And if you are into photography, which is probably the audience of this podcast, they're places that haven't been photographed. So you get to go and do something that is not biased. You haven't seen a photo of this. So you get to just take a picture that you come up with, which, not that you can't do that anywhere, but it's fun to not have any references before you see something.
Exactly. That's something that I've thought a lot about over the last couple years now is, avoiding the obvious shot, the obvious composition, and digging deeper into an area to find the way it speaks to you personally. And like you said, going to places that haven't been shot 101,000 times, and all these places where you can have your own little adventure and interpret it without bias, without any preconceived shot in your mind. That's going to be really cool, man.
And I'm lucky. Now I get to watch everyone that buys the book and reads the book do their thing. And I already know of a lot of photographers that are excited about it. And I guess it doesn't even seem fair that now I just get to be the viewer and see all this awesome photography come from these places too. So it's kind of the reward for finishing and getting this in the hands of the readers, is to see what they're going to do with it too.
That's going to be a very exciting aspect of things. As you were saying that, I just thought of this. You should come up with a specific hashtag or something, found in Jake's book or something like that, where you can just track all the shots from what people have done from using your book as a reference.
It could be a lot of fun. Well, I guess we'll just have to see. No idea how frequently any of them will have visitors, but potentially maybe a few more than they had, which was probably not hard to do, given that I think a lot of years these creeks and waterfalls maybe don't have any visitors, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I know in some of our discussions that we've had outside of the podcast here, you tell me all the time that you come across something and you can tell the last people that may have seen it were likely miners or maybe logging, doing something where you can tell that people were there. Maybe there's some old steps or there's an old trail, what have you. Finding stuff like that, it's got to be cool to kind of take that step back in history.
It's definitely something that the Upper Peninsula has a lot of, is signs of humans, but sometimes not recently. With the logging and the mining, you do come across that stuff, and it's sometimes difficult to tell when it was from. Other times you can do some research and maybe oh, there's a mine over here that was related to the mining operation that happened in this spot. And so you're never the first person to see a waterfall, but you might be the first person in a few years or more. But then also, it's always a little endearing to be finding signs of humanity when you're just miles and miles out in the forest. One time we found a snowcat that was really old and beat up. Kind of don't have an idea of why that should have been up there. The other day, I found something that was like a bike chain, but each link was 6 or 8 inches wide and long, and just these massive links for whatever this chain was getting used for. And a lot of 55-gallon drums. And then sometimes you get weird, quirky stuff. One time I found a camp where there was a lot of glass bottles and tins, and that's probably where the people were eating and living and doing that aspect of it. But it was also because they were mining out there, or at least prospecting, depending on where it is. And then occasionally you even find a little mine shaft or something too.
That's really cool. I actually came across a mine shaft back in May. It was huge, just absolutely huge. And as I was walking down the trail, I saw this little section that was probably 20 feet away. I meandered over there and took a look, had to go up this little hill to get to it. And you look, and yeah, it was a mine shaft that was mostly filled with water, but it's cool to find that stuff out there. But a good place to pin a little note of caution for the listeners: be mindful that those are out there on these adventures. Do not fall into them, because it's probably not going to end well, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I would just say if it looks like a pit, don't walk in it. If it looks like a half of a sphere, walk around it. I'd probably walk around of a lot of depressions in the woods that are just the way the earth is. But if you assume all of the little pits could be a bottomless mine shaft, then at least you'll avoid some of those, hopefully.
One thing that I do when I'm going off trail, but really anytime I'm hiking, is I use trekking poles. And when I'm getting off trail, if I'm walking through the forest and I see that there's an area where the leaves just all kind of suddenly dip down into a small area or what have you, 9 times out of 10, it's easier to just go around. But if you can't go around, just go up to it with your trekking pole and poke it. Make sure that it's solid, and don't don't just venture over the top of it, because that could be exceedingly dangerous.
Yeah, that's good advice. And there's a lot of sketchy terrain. So even if it's not mines, it can be loose rocks, it can be big rocks, it can be holes that got covered by leaves that you can't tell are there. And I think you're spot on. Trekking poles can just kind of help sort things out and figure out if this is a deep hole or solid ground to walk on.
Another thing is, stability when you're going up and down hills. There's been a few instances where, especially in the spring, I'll be going along and I'll put my foot down, and all of a sudden you're in mud. And if you're on a hill, you're going to start sliding. So being able to catch yourself with your poles and stop the slide, or stabilize yourself enough to back up and find another way around, it's imperative. It's really important to have that ability, because there's been a couple times where I've slipped and just fallen and just grabbed for trees and been like, well, I'm going wherever nature's taking me at this point. As you've gone out over the last 8 years plus, explored all these places, that journey to 1,000, the journey of compiling this book, and just safety, animal safety, everything in mind, of all of the crazy experiences that you've had out there that really made you question if maybe you had pushed a little too far. You got any stories for one of those?
So I was flying my drone at Superior Falls, and I was at the standard overlook where you're staring across the void to Superior Falls, probably the first view that most people get of that waterfall. And at that time, I did not really realize that drones aren't designed to fly below takeoff altitude. they don't like having a negative altitude. So I'm over like getting this sweet shot at the lip of the waterfall, just loving it. And I didn't realize I'm like 10 feet below where I took off. And so the drone started going right towards the opposite side, the Wisconsin side of the river. And I saw it. I'm watching the drone and I'm telling the drone to go the other direction, and it didn't matter. So that thing was just dead set on, we are hitting Wisconsin at this cliff. So the drone just went right into the hillside, and it crashed like at the lip of the waterfall, kind of. But there was this little 4 foot by 4 foot depression with a couple trees that was kind of flat. And I was able to see from the side that the drone was not totally in the river, not impossible to reach. But to get to the drone, I was going to have to swim across the river right upstream from the waterfall. And for those that aren't familiar, it's like a 60-foot waterfall. It's kind of big. But I looked at it and there wasn't a lot of flow. And I thought, okay, well, even if it somehow washed me to the lip of this waterfall, I don't think I'd go over because it's so shallow. I'd almost be like a beached whale on the edge looking over the lip, like near my death, but I'd be fine. And it really, the river wasn't moving very fast. It was kind of low. So it seemed like swimming across the river wasn't that big of a deal. So I got rid of my cell phone and all my stuff and swam across the river and started shimming up the rocks because now I have to walk towards the lip of the drop on the Wisconsin side of the river. And the scrambling up the cliff was not that bad. But I got to this area where it was like loose rock and scree down a 45-degree slope. And the bottom of that was just this cliff down to a long ways down at the bottom of bare rock and stuff. So you can't screw up. And I had to cross that. There was like the only path to get to the drone. But then on the other side was this little safe zone, 5 feet wide, with a couple trees where the drone happened to land. And I still don't know how the drone landed there. Everywhere else would have been death to the drone. It would have been me littering a drone into a river I love, which I'm not trying to do. So either way, I didn't want to litter the drone on the side of the river either, because it'll end up in the water at some point. So I needed to go get this thing. And it was like 15 feet of scree, but I realized I could kick a little pathway. Like I could kind of shuffle my feet and knock the rocks off and make a little 4-inch wide dirt path. And so I just kept doing that until I got across the thing and gave myself a little pathway. And then I breathed a little and tried to get my composure when I got to the drone. It was a little bit of realizing I'm never going to get this view again. This is a sweet angle to see this waterfall. But since I had to swim across the river, I don't even have a camera. I didn't bring the drone controller, so I can't even use the drone as the camera. So I have to mentally take a picture, and that's the best I get from this perspective at the lip of the drop that, like, I'm not going back to get. So I grab my drone and I have to turn around and go across this scree of death again. But now I had my little goat path, and so I made it across. And then when I got to the river, this time I had to swim across with one hand because I had to hold the drone up from the water to not ruin my drone after all this effort to save it. And so then I kind of had to like swim holding the drone up here back to the Michigan side. And it all worked out. But I had some friends there and they watched it and said, that was like the scariest thing watching you do that. And I told them, yeah, it felt really scary too.
It sounds intense, man.
Yeah, maybe I pushed it a little too hard, but I just didn't want to litter my drone on the side of this huge, awesome waterfall.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'd be the same way. You don't want to leave, especially something electronic. But I don't know that I would have swam across. I may have tried to find just driven around and tried to find a different route in.
That might be the right smart choice. For context, I do paddle whitewater and feel pretty confident in my ability to judge danger and assess risk around waterfalls and large features that could be deadly. And so for those viewers that haven't seen all of my hairy whitewater videos, which really aren't that hairy, but they sometimes look a little intense, it does put me in a position to feel confident looking at the risk crossing and deciding like, okay, I can do this. The scree pile of death is the dumbest thing I did there, but the river crossing, it could be scary. There's some days you really shouldn't do that, like a lot of them. But in summer when flows are low, it felt not as scary as the thing I was about to do. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend any of that.
Yeah, especially just with waterfalls, but in the rivers themselves, I've walked quite a few of the rivers in the UP looking for things myself. And I've come across some instances where you realize if the water may have been flowing a little faster, or maybe if I wasn't using my trekking poles or what have you, if I wasn't paying attention, there's potholes in some of those rivers. There's currents that can grab you in 6 inches and sweep you off your feet. So, for those of you listening out there that are looking to get into this waterfall book and just looking to have some personalized adventures, just do so cautiously because, as Jake said, he's very experienced. He can read the water, he knows what he's looking for. If you're going to go out in the water, just do so cautiously.
I think that's really sound advice. And there are multiple entries where I'm really clear that, hey, there are some risks here that are bigger than other times. There are dangers just downstream or dangers in crossing Lake Superior to see something. And I really think knowing your limits and not pushing it can keep you safe. And that's kind of the goal, is to get home so you can look at all those cool photos you got and tell your friends and family about it. So being safe is kind of number one rule. And once you start to know your limits, you get to play around with these awesome locations. And there are some times where the only way to see a certain section of river and only see a waterfall, the only way to do it is to cross a river. So if you have the entries in my book, you kind of have to wait till the big river is lower for the season so that it's safe to cross to get to some tributary that has a cool waterfall on it. At least one of the entries, you have to paddle whitewater. There's a little canyon inside a canyon, and the only way to get there legally is to paddle class 3, which isn't necessarily inaccessible, but class 3 isn't something you can do off the couch with no experience. So there's some interesting ones just within what risks you have to mitigate to do it safely. Lake Superior too. There's some waterfalls that pour into the lake, and if you go on a glassy, calm day, you'll have a really good time. But if you don't look up wave heights and you go on a really wavy day, you could have a really bad time. So, yeah, at least 4 or 5 entries in my book really ask you to make sure you know the conditions you're getting out there exploring and getting after it under, and make sure you choose the right conditions, because no one else is going to come help you or keep you safe if you don't.
Right. And I really appreciate the combination of adventure that you included in your book. I didn't know that piece, that some of it you're going to have to do some whitewater rafting, some of it you may have to do some kayaking. That combination of different approaches, that's exciting, because most of the time we pull up to a trailhead or park on the side of the road, whatever, we hike in, hike back. But adding that extra element of, well, now I need to get in a kayak, or I need to find people that are comfortable taking me on this whitewater adventure so I can get to this point, find a guide, what have you. That adds a really cool piece of adventure to that experience.
I really enjoy the specific days where I get to combine a few sports into one. So if there's paddling and hiking, yeah, let's do it. There's at least one entry that stands out because I don't go into detail about every turn to make, because essentially you're going to mountain bike for 10 miles to get there. And it's a better filter to not tell you where the turns are, because if you're qualified, or if you can handle getting to that one, then you'll be able to figure out which roads to take through the forest land. But because it's such a long access on a mountain bike, I tell you where it is and where I'd park. And then I say, you'll sort it out yourself how to get there. And I think that'll be good for you to do. And if you can't do, good. No one should tackle some of these ones if they're not really, if they're going to get in over their head. None of us want someone getting in over their head out there in the middle of nowhere. So I kind of like the access as a filter, just to keep you on your toes, respecting the water.
One thing that I really like about the book and the way you approached this entire project is that you're not doing a bunch of hand holding. Essentially, you're giving people the data to get out there and have those personalized adventures and have those experiences, but they have to rely on their skills. They have to rely on what they feel most comfortable with. And the combination of quite literally every type of outdoor adventure, from mountain biking to kayaking to whitewater rafting to just hiking, that combination I think is really cool in just introducing people to different aspects of the outdoors.
And there's a little bit of something for everyone and a lot of walking creeks and waterfalls, but there's quite a bit of variety, and it really speaks to the UP in general. You can find what you like. If you like things that involve lots of big rocks and cliffs and stuff, there's that. If you like waterfalls, there's over 1,000 of that. And onward, there's tons of mountain bike adventures. There's lots of paddling adventures. The paddling itself spans a wide range. There really is a little bit for everyone. And what's not to love about that?
Right. And it's the outdoor experience just for everybody. And that's exciting, I feel, for those people that, like we talked about earlier, maybe they feel that there are barriers to entry where they're not comfortable hiking certain things, or they're nervous. Maybe it's wildlife, getting lost. You can kind of stair step your way into it. You don't have to go on the grandest, most remote adventure as your first one. The option's there, but having that option in general is really cool. It's not just drive to this point, park here, walk 10 feet, make a left. There you go.
Yeah, there's a handful that are almost that easy, which is fun because it really embodies the idea that there's always more waterfalls. There's always maybe one that you've walked closer than you realize to. And I love that. But it spans the whole range of that. So there's stuff that you're going to find out about and think, wow, I was within 100 yards of this thing 5 different times because I love going to that area and I never knew. And then there's other ones where, oh, I gotta bushwhack 2 miles just to get to this waterfall. And that's after 2 or 3 miles walking down a trail. And that's just one direction. And then I'm going to walk up the creek for a half mile. And, some of them ask you to put a lot of effort in just to see this cool feature on some random creek. But the range is impressive.
I really like that. And we've talked a lot about the adventures, the book, and everything. Do all of the waterfalls that you've included in the book, do they all have photos of these waterfalls, or just certain ones?
So I include 1 or 2 photos in each entry, but almost every entry, if not well over half, has a lot more than 1 or 2 waterfalls if you go to that spot. So relating to what you were saying in terms of the fun for the reader just to see it for themselves, I wanted to share a nice picture with each entry, so I do get to sneak in my photography. But since it's a guidebook more than anything, I wanted to make sure I presented where it was and how to get there and shared at least one image. But really, I didn't want to ruin it by sharing a picture of every cool thing. So where the creek has 8 or 9 waterfalls, yeah, you only get one from me. And like with Wow Creek, I had a hard time picking what photo to share. There's another one I want to name, but it's a name that would probably show up on a map. So there's just a lot of them where they have so many cool waterfalls that I find myself looking at certain creeks and thinking, man, if one of these waterfalls was here, that would be worth my 5 hours of hiking. But instead I get 8 really awesome ones. How cool. But a lot of the time, every one of those 8 would have been worth the effort you've already made, which maybe that's kind of my favorite kind of creek, is those ones that just keep dropping.
It just embodies the kind of baseline of what we've been talking about, is really adventure, discovery, having that personal adventure that makes a huge difference in your connection and your relationship to that place.
I mean, it might be cliche, but you really do get to choose your own adventure, and it is the journey, not the destination. And I've found that that's really actually 100% true. I like what I see along the way, whether it's a cool tree or something that nature or weather or both are doing that day. There's all these little things that come along with going to see that waterfall. So it becomes more that the waterfall is what got you out the door, but the waterfall is almost here or there, take it or leave it. Whether you needed the waterfall to have a great time in the woods, probably not, just because it's good to be outside. So one day there's a waterfall in the book that we visited, and it had snowed. I think it was this time of year actually. And so it had snowed and then it warmed up. And the day we were out in the woods was a bluebird, awesome sunny day, bluebird skies. And the snow was thick enough that it was up in the trees and it was covering everything. And right as we got to the creek, even though it was sunny, it was raining, but the rain was the melting snow, and it created some amazing colors, as you can imagine, with the light reflecting off of the snow. Everything was bright. And then it was this weird thing of, oh man, there's no rain in the sky, but the forest is going to rain for an hour while all this snow melts. And I never knew that was a thing. It was one of those scenes I couldn't have dreamed up, but it was surreal. And the reason we got to see that was just because we wanted to go see this specific creek that day. And so I feel like I'm rewarded with experiences that I couldn't have predicted, but they were there. And if you get out every week, eventually you'll start seeing one or two, maybe more. You'll see these random things that are fleeting, and they're parts of nature that are wonderful and beautiful, but I don't know how I would have ever scheduled something like that. You just have to be there.
It builds into, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And you can increase that luck by just going out and trying. You don't have to make a huge plan step by step, go across the country, whatever. You just have to get out there. And like you said, the snow melting off the trees and the forest is quite literally raining on you. That's amazing. I would never think that, like you said, you would just not think that up if you're imagining an adventure, and it's the little details that tell the bigger story.
In the region that I like to explore, the Western UP and the UP in general, but the Western UP just has so much variety that you really have to keep going out there and keep going to new places if you want to start to see even a small percentage of what you could see. The landscape has quite a different, quite a lot of variety in terms of unique features that are, in my opinion, worth visiting and quite compelling.
I know you and I have talked about it, where you, for the listeners, Jake and I'll send them pictures of different waterfalls that I go to and what have you. And Jake can identify at least what region the waterfall might be in, just based on the rock type, because there's so many different types that you start on the west side and it's one type of rock, and then you get into the Keweenaw and maybe it's a little different, but then you get over into central or the eastern UP and now it's different over there. That's really cool.
And I think if you are interested in rivers and creeks and especially waterfalls, you can learn a lot and enhance what you're doing by dabbling in geology. I wouldn't claim to be a geology expert, but I've learned a lot from trying to understand what's going on with the rocks and maybe learn about what some of the common rock types are and that sort of thing. So I would encourage everyone to take at least a little bit of a side quest into geology if you like waterfalls.
Yeah, agreed. That's excellent advice, and something that I myself did at the beginning of the year. I grabbed a couple geology books. I'll include them in the show notes below for anyone that's interested in picking them up. But just learning how these places came to be, how these areas were formed, what type of rock, what type of historical events the earth went through to get to this point. That's really neat.
I think so too. And one of my favorite stories from all of the adventures of rivers and waterfalls, what I've seen, and this might be my firsthand experience in my opinion, but the rocks and most origin stories from different groups of people that have lived throughout the planet and different religions, they all kind of agree that a big flood happened. And it seems to me like it doesn't actually matter what religion you are, if you have any religion, where you come from, what your background is, or if you just like rocks. Everyone's got a flood story that kind of matches. And I really like that one because you don't always have a universal agreement, but no one's disagreeing that a lot of water covered the landscape at some point, and you can see that. And it's impossible to deny because I can see the channels in the rock that are a mile wide, and there's ancient waterfalls that aren't there at all anymore. There may be even just a hill in the forest. But yeah, you can't deny that a big flood happened, and it's cool that everyone seems to agree, including the rocks.
I like that, including the rocks. Yeah, I mean, and that's part of the adventure. I feel like, for speaking for myself, my opinion, part of the adventure is understanding the history and how these places came to be, and knowing that what you're seeing is thousands of years of change, and appreciating that you get to see it at this point in its journey to whatever it'll be in another 1,000 years. That's really cool.
And I like that where if you zoom out, it won't be the same. It just is going to be on a time scale that human brains don't always register as easily. But I think a lot of the change from what I can see, there's these changes that kind of happen day to day, drop by drop, year to year. I think a good example of that for waterfalls is Copper Falls State Park. Within the lifetime of people that are middle aged, they have their I have friends that have photos where within their lifetime they have taken pictures that document Copper Falls changing and moving. So that one is a really good one in terms of like it's changing live in front of our eyes, and it's not taking geologic time to do it. It's doing it in a decade and two. So if you look at a photo of Copper Falls from 20 years ago, you can see a lot of differences. And I'm sure in 20 more years, that thing will continue to erode. But then there's also a lot of waterfalls and rivers and canyons in the Upper Peninsula and the North Woods where the bulk of what you see happened at a massive water related event, a massive flooding event, whether that was precipitation, glacial melting. There's a lot of theories in what can cause such large floods, but a lot of what we see was scoured out in a massive flood, and maybe then it's formed a little bit after, but it is in these pulse events that the bulk of the scouring and the shaping occurs.
That's amazing that that can happen. And I mean, when you think about it, it's just nature doing what nature does. I mean, you've got water, wind, rain, ice, all these different elements. And I know you and I have talked at length about the historical changes that have occurred throughout the Upper Peninsula and the size of the mountains that some agree were once there, and how it was a true mountain range. And it's always made me think, like, you look out west, you have the Rockies, and then you look, well, southeast of us, down in Tennessee, you've got the Smokies. And then around the Great Lakes, we've got the Porcupine Mountains, the Huron Mountains, all these ranges that by some people's standards are like, okay, yeah, they're not really mountains, but they once were the same size, and they've just been eroded over a huge portion of time to become what we see today.
Yeah, that's a really interesting history too. I was able to chat with a geology professor and ask about the height that he perceived the previous mountain range of the Upper Peninsula to be. I thought it's an interesting question. You know, how tall were those mountains, right? And so I asked him, and he suggested probably something like the Rockies. And if you went south further into Wisconsin, perhaps even a little bit taller. But yeah, he was pretty confident that, you know, it was something like the Rockies here. And then when you look at rock layers and erosion and how those got eroded down to what we have left, modern day rocks, the rock we see is oftentimes the less erodible layer. So the stuff that was softer and easier to scrape away has been removed. And so we don't necessarily have a footprint where the tall points we see in 2025 are the tall points that were there before the glaciers. What they are is the harder rock that was underneath those old mountains.
That's something to think about because it shows that transition of time and builds that appreciation for what you're seeing, because as you're going out, you're seeking out the waterfalls that are in your book or seeking out waterfalls that you may have just come across on a topo map. You're like, hey, you know what? Maybe there's something here. You know that you're watching that process in action as it's happening right before your eyes. And I think personally, it's one of the coolest things to see, especially you mentioned those creeks that maybe they're just a trickle most of the time, but after a real good rain event or during the winter snow melt, all of a sudden they come alive. We're literally watching that process in action.
And chasing waterfalls involves not always getting what you want. And that makes it a little more rewarding when you do finally line it up and get to something with a lot of water flowing over it. And for better or worse, I find myself repeating in this book every entry, hey, wait till there's some rain. Hey, definitely going to need some rain for this one. Oh, yeah, you might not want to go to this one unless the snow's melting or it's raining. And I'm like a broken record because when it comes to small streams, they do dry up a little bit. And that's normal. That's part of their ecology and how they exist in the world. But if you're a photographer, it's not as fun to shoot dry rocks as it is to shoot an actual waterfall with water, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you're going there hopeful that you're going to find water and flow, but to your earlier point, just being out in nature, you'll find something. It builds into that, like, don't hyper fixate and envision something. Just stay open to the experience. Just keep an open mind and something will present itself. Maybe it's a small scene. Maybe you come across a cool overlook, what have you. There's always something out there. Just gotta have those open eyes and you'll see it.
It's true. There's always something. There's good light everywhere. It's not that the light is the same. So just because it's noon doesn't mean the light is harsh everywhere. It just means you have to look a little harder to find the good light. And I would say with waterfalls, and from a photography perspective, the first visit almost doesn't matter because there's so many waterfalls that when it does rain big, I'm going to go to as many as I can. And it's going to be a small slice of all the ones I would want to. So to know how to prioritize where to go when it does rain a lot or when the snow is melting, you have to have already been there to compare that to every other option you're considering. So I really think it isn't at all about the water levels when you first go there because you don't need it to be filled with water to know, oh, this one's going to be great with some water. And we say that a lot. I hate to be a broken record, but man, if it rained a lot, boy, would this one be awesome. And it's true. But there's no downside to knowing what's out there so that you can plan better for when it does rain. And I definitely have prioritized chasing an awesome photograph at a specific waterfall where actually the cover of my book for like the last 2 years, I've gone there 5 times. And finally this year I found it with water and it was really rewarding because I had failed so many different times.
And that's excellent, outstanding advice that I think is imperative to all photography endeavors, really. But to your point, going there, personally being there, seeing it, and understanding the layout of the land, what is needed for this scene to work or for this waterfall to flow, or what exactly am I specifically personally looking for here. That's huge because, to your point, your first visit to really anywhere, you're kind of just taking it in, you're scoping it out, you're learning it, but then you take that knowledge and now you can apply it to get your desired results at some point. In your case, it took you forever to get that one, but when you showed up and it was exactly what you had hoped, that's one of the best feelings, man.
Yeah, exactly. Having some elusive photo to put a lot of work towards and be patient as you make an effort, but are at the whim of what weather and climate want to do also. It makes it more rewarding when you do finally land it. And certainly once you've seen the scene, even if it isn't the settings and parameters you want, it's a lot more straightforward to envision whatever photograph you're going to create once you've been there in person. You can only do so much from what you learn at, looking at the computer kind of thing.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And throughout all of your adventures and every entry that you've made on Instagram and just really leading up to the release of the book, I've always noticed in your posts that you'll add a note about that, and just kind of, I wouldn't call it a disclaimer, but more of a, I went to this place X amount of times and got nothing, but I went back this one last time, maybe not the last time, but the most recent, and it worked. And that really is the story of landscape photography as a whole. Sometimes you got to go back way more times than you expected, and you'll finally get the conditions you're hoping for, but you've got to be patient.
And if it was easy to get those conditions, you would have got them the first try. So if you've got a vision, it's worth finding out what that's all about, probably.
Very well said. If you've got a vision, you've got to pursue it. And if it's easy, then everyone's going to have the shot, which actually makes me think of something else you just recently did, which very unique shot, very unique situation over at Tequamanon Falls. Tell us about what you guys did over there.
For starters, I had seen over 1,000 waterfalls in the Upper Peninsula, and I still hadn't been to Tequamanon Falls. And that just felt kind of wrong. Kind of like, man, I don't know what I'm talking about if I say I've seen a lot of waterfalls if I haven't seen that one. So I was already hoping I would get to Tequamanon Falls sometime this year. And just a couple weeks ago, my friend, who's a professional kayaker, texted me asking if I want to do some photos over there because he was heading through the area as he crossed the country, and he was going to kayak a few laps down the waterfall. And so I thought about it a little bit and cleared my schedule and headed over because I already was really stoked to just look at it for myself as a waterfall lover. But when your buddy says he's going to kayak it, it does make it a little more fun to get a photo of that going on too. So made the trek across the UP from the far, I live in Ironwood, so the very far west end, all the way over to T Falls. And Andrew Morrissey is his name, so look him up. Maybe we can add his contact info in the caption or whatever. But he had 2 lines that were amazing, and I got to take some pictures of it, and we had a lot of fun over there.
Yeah, man, I saw that all over Facebook and just social media the last week and a half now since you guys did that. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody, or at least anything to that degree, at Tequamanon Falls. Is he one of the first that's done that?
Actually, Tequamanon Falls has been done by quite a few different people. It doesn't get done that often, and these boaters are elite Class 5 whitewater paddlers. Um, as you mentioned, it got shared around a lot, and so there's a lot of pages where people that aren't used to seeing whitewater content see this. And it was funny how often they told Andy, "Oh, this is AI," and they'd actually be arguing with the kayaker himself that it wasn't real, and it was kind of maybe speaks to the times we live in. But Tequamanon Falls only gets paddled a little bit, maybe a handful of times any given year, but it's on the radar of some paddlers that love it. And for its height, it's around 50 feet. It's a pretty straightforward, clean landing. The lip is nice and rolling. As you can see, there was a little bit of a tree that Andy had to duck last week or 2 weeks ago. But it might sound weird, but for someone like Andy that paddles large waterfalls, it's a really nice waterfall to go over.
Yeah, I mean, in the video that I saw of it, it looked like he handled that very well, way better than I ever could have. But then again, I'm not trained at all in that arena and don't claim to be.
Yeah, I mean, he's gone down waterfalls that are vertical and over 100 feet. So that's probably a pretty small group of people that have done that too, which it makes him really qualified for it. But he got some interesting feedback, and it was kind of funny to hear some of the comments saying it's all AI. And no, in this case, it was actually just a guy that loves doing waterfalls and going over them.
Right. And it was funny because in one of the first posts I actually saw about it, I looked at the comments and I saw people in there saying the same thing. Oh, this is AI. This isn't real. Nobody did that. And this was when I knew that you were physically going out there to take some pictures and everything. And it was just, like you said, a sign of the times, because I knew it was real. I knew what had happened because you and I had talked about it. You told me this is what was going on. And just to see people's reaction, it was like, guys, not everything's AI. I mean, admittedly, there's a lot of AI out there, a lot of bad AI, but it was wild.
I think there's some foreshadowing to maybe in the future it will be difficult to tell and everything will get questioned, and that's maybe a whole nother topic. But yeah, it was interesting to have that. I've never had that strong of a sentiment where it was consistent from many different people. And even the guy that said, "Hey, I was steering that kayak," that wasn't enough. The one person said, "Nope, that wasn't true." And I mean, he was there, he was in the boat, but I guess if you say so, then it wasn't true. Not that it matters though. He's out there doing it for fun, and he didn't even remember, or he didn't even care. He was down the road and realized he didn't have his camera or his GoPro, and he didn't turn around to go get that because he wasn't there to get the footage. If I wouldn't have taken the photo, he would have just had his mom recording on his cell phone. And she's an awesome, wonderful woman. It was really fun hanging out with Andy's mom while he ran the waterfall a few times. But I mean, when people talk about being a daredevil and just doing it for the clicks, like the guy didn't even bring his GoPro. So it seems to me like, he's out there just for the fun of it and the enjoyment of kayaking. And that's probably what it's all about.
Oh, for sure. And that's really what it is all about. And I think that's a really good example of why it's important to have those personalized adventures we talked about earlier, to get out there in nature. Because, yeah, there is a lot of AI. There is a lot of nonsense out there. And unfortunately, people are, for lack of a better term, being trained to question everything. Conditioned may be a better phrase, but people are starting to question everything because, admittedly, yes, AI is getting better and it's becoming deceiving. But you get Jake's book, or you just take a hike in nature, you get away from all of it. It invites, those experiences invite that interaction, that authentic experience. And that's really what it what we're all out there for. At least I like to tell myself that.
The world is a big playground, and it's waiting for us to enjoy it and explore it. And it's up to you to decide how you like to interact. So me and my friends, we like paddling boats down the waterfalls because that's just a fun challenge. But there's 1,001 flavors of how to go explore the world, and you get to decide which your favorite are. And it does seem like waterfalls are universally appreciated by most people. How we interact with them kind of spans a wide range, but in terms of appreciation for waterfalls, kind of seems like it's something that appeals to most people. And obviously, I see why that is, but you get to decide how to interact with that. Whether you want to take a photo, maybe just look at it, swim in it, or huck your kayak off it.
Just jump in a boat and go on over. Don't Not recommended, listeners. Go with a guide.
Listeners, it's kind of recommended after the appropriate level of experience. But you're right. No, listeners, don't do that. But kind of do it.
Don't be afraid. I mean, admittedly, I have always been intimidated by Superior, and to Jake's credit, him and I talked about this at the beginning of the year and even last year, where I wanted to buy a kayak, and I was like, first, I don't even know what kayak to buy other than a sea kayak. And I don't have the experience, the training, like, where do I even start? And Jake has been just a tremendous help from the word go and get me pointed in the right direction, even, offering to show me how to upright a kayak if you flip over, or test different kayaks to see which one fits. And that's what you want to be looking for if you guys are wanting to get out there and do some of these adventures, is, find a guide, find an expert, and have someone teach you the right way to do it. Because like I said, I was intimidated by Superior. It's got cold water. We all know that she can change on a dime. You got to be prepared for that stuff, and knowing what to do, when to do it, and how to anticipate it, that's huge.
And it's fun to learn. It's fun to build that relationship with the water, whether it's a river or the lake or whitewater or a little bit of all of the above. I've always found that I'm having some of my favorite adventures when I'm out there growing as a paddler and safely exploring some of these things. And Lake Superior deserves our respect. So does every river. And it doesn't mean we can't go and interact with them. We just have to have enough respect to know when we probably should stay away and know which conditions are safe and which aren't. But within the realm of doing that safely, there's a lot more adventures for everyone out there if they get in a boat.
Oh, without question. There's been so many times while I've been out there that I've stopped and looked at something and thought, if I had a kayak or a raft or something, I could get a way better view of this waterfall, this lake, maybe found some cliffs on the shoreline, what have you. And it gets the wheels turning, but do so with the appropriate level of respect. To Jake's point, don't just go out there and hope for the best.
Yeah, water is something that adds a little extra layer of potential challenge, but there's enough tools nowadays, whether it's river gauges, waves, and wind on Lake Superior, you name it. You can learn a lot about what the conditions you might encounter before you even leave home. And hopefully that can help people make informed decisions on where to go on any given day.
Definitely. Before people buy your book, or for those that are already buying it, bought it, what have you, what are some good recommendations that you would give for people in just preparing and gauging their abilities before they embark on an adventure of their own?
Great question. I would say for water-based adventures where you might be getting in a boat, whether that's a river or a lake, be honest with yourself about if you've ever done that. If you have some experience, then you have some experience. If that is completely new to you, then being honest about that will help set you up to do it in a way that doesn't add extra risk. So if you've never paddled on a river, if you've never paddled on Lake Superior, then for your first time, go with someone that's done it before. Learn from them, ask questions. There's going to be a lot of reasonable questions you might have, and you can kind of fast track your progress just by starting with someone that has a little bit of experience. And generally, there's guiding services too, so you don't even have to make a personal relationship with someone and get that connection without, you know, you don't have to have a friend that's a guide to be able to do that. You can go and hire someone to give you that experience. And I would say for Lake Superior, you're always going to be able to find a guide somewhere on the lake that'll come to the part of lake you want to paddle. So even if you've got a unique section of Lake Superior that you want to kayak, it's probably within the region of a guiding service that can go with you and keep you safe. And then with rivers, there are a handful of companies that guide whitewater, and some of them will go on a river that you want to go on, but you have to plan that with them and you have to coordinate that and book that trip. But really, with any of the water-based adventures, if you don't think it's something that you've ever done anything like it, just go hire a guide or find a friend that's experienced in that realm and go with them. I think that'll really get everyone off on the right foot.
Definitely. Excellent advice there. Especially like just general safety, like the buddy system. Go out with somebody. Maybe you guys both have the same experience level and you're both learning. Maybe you're not hitting Superior. Maybe you're not hitting any whitewater scenarios, but go out with somebody and hike to one of the falls that's marked, not mountain biking or paddling or kayaking or what have you. And, you know, you build each other up in that process of, hey, yeah, I can do this. This isn't that bad. And before you know it, you'll be out doing all kinds of things.
That's great advice. You should always go with a buddy. Even if you're just walking along a creek, you could slip and hit your head. And if you're going to creeks that didn't even have a trail, how is the help going to come and save you once you're concussed on the side of a river because you slipped? So it can happen anywhere. And I think a lot of risk can be mitigated by just having another human with you. And when you're going off trail, that just seems maybe practical.
Yeah, very much so. And it actually brings to mind something that I wanted to mention earlier about getting help in the event that you need it. When you're out there, you want to have some kind of distress beacon. So Garmin InReach, they make different personal location beacons that you can buy and just carry it on you. Don't put it on your pack. Don't put it somewhere that isn't directly attached to like your belt loop or something. Because one thing that I was told when I was starting to take hiking and getting out in nature very seriously, the essentials, you want to keep them on your person, because if you slip, you fall into the river, what have you, you've got a heavy backpack on. If all of your equipment that you're relying on is in that backpack and it's pulling you down to the underwater and you have to drop that pack to surface and get back out of the water, well, now all your stuff is at the bottom of the river or whatever body of water you're at. So carrying those essentials on you and making sure that they're in your pocket or maybe in a pouch, whatever you have to do, that's big. Make sure that you're planning ahead in that regard.
Maybe I'm over planning, but I would also say whenever I cross a river with my pack, I unbuckle my hip belt if there's like a chest clip, because I have a couple different packs, but I kind of unhook everything so that if I did slip in the water, I'm not having a hard time getting my pack off, because you might want to slide out of it in some instances. And it's probably a really unlikely scenario. Most river crossings in backpacking trail areas are pretty shallow, and they chose that area because it's safer to cross. But there's some times where it's a little hairy and you really don't want to slip. And almost every time that there's a river crossing of any style, I like the idea of not being clipped in before I even get wet.
That's something that I've always done too. Is I'll undo the belt buckle and the chest strap, and I'm relying on those trekking poles, but fully aware that if something goes wrong, the pack is the first thing that's coming down, and the next thing is I need to get out of the water. I need to assess the situation and figure it out. But to your point too, the Porcupine Mountains and the majority of rivers that I've been to in the Upper Peninsula as a whole, if there's a trail there, the point of the trail that gets to the water, it's likely going to be a relatively safe access point. And I mean, just apply a little bit of common sense in these situations. If the water's moving fast, or if you feel like maybe it's not a good place to cross when you're on a personal backwoods adventure, then listen to that gut feeling, because 9 times out of 10 it's going to be right.
And if you're by yourself, grab a stick, even if you don't have trekking poles, because another point of contact in moving water, especially in moving water, is really useful. You can even do that by holding the shoulders and working with your friend and shimmy across the river together to stabilize one another. So there's a lot of ways to add stability. And regardless of whether or not you started with trekking poles, I'm sure, at least up in the UP, you can probably find a stick if you need it. And I would really encourage that for stability when making those crossings. Even if it's a tiny little creek, sticks help gauge depth of those things, and just in general, maybe keep you on your feet a little more frequently.
I've done that in the past when I've gone on a little scouting run and I just leave the trekking poles, the backpack, everything sitting in the truck. And I'm like, I'm going to go check this area out, whatever. And then you get there and you're like, well, I kind of wish I would have had my actual equipment, but a stick works. Common sense is definitely something you want to rely on. But there's been, especially in the spring, you'll come up on something somewhere. It's inevitable where, sure, maybe if you saw it in July or August of last year, it was pretty tame. But now there's a lot of elements that are challenging you and could prove dangerous if not respected, to our earlier point.
And a lot of these places, a good chunk of what's in my book, and just in general, even the well-known ones, if you look around, you can see, holy cow, the water has been way higher at this spot. And it happens a lot because most spots have had high flows at some point, and many of them, the flow left some evidence there for you to see on whatever day you're there. And so when you look around and start to find those high water marks, maybe it's some debris stuck in tree branches, or maybe it's like the way the water scrubbed the rock clean. You can kind of see the water line. Maybe it's the way it bent the grasses over. There's all sorts of indications, but sometimes it's fun to imagine what it would have been like. And you can see that the water's been 5-6 feet taller and higher up than it is on that day. And it's fun to be there on those high flow days, but usually the evidence is around there, even if it's low flows. And you can tell some days this thing just goes wild.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I love finding when I'm out there. And you can usually tell by at least from what I've noticed, is like where moss is growing on the riverbank, or like you mentioned, where the rock has been scrubbed clean. You can get in there when the water's low, and you can look around and just imagine, kind of envision that area and think, wow, like the water's usually maybe 2-3 feet higher than it is right now. Think about that amount of water, that the power of that water, and what that place would look like. That's intense when you start really thinking about what this place can be under different conditions.
And with waterfall photography, you're probably going to be doing that all the time.
Oh, for sure. And that's something that I've certainly noticed over the years is whenever I go to a new place or return to a place I've been, I'm noticing changes in the landscape. I'm noticing maybe the water used to be at this point or at this level, and now it's down here, or, you know, all these different thoughts kind of start running through your head. And for me, it's actually become somewhat of my, call it, preparation to take an image before I even take the camera out of the bag, before I even fool around with anything. I'll usually set my backpack down and I'll just take it in. I'll stand there and watch how the water flows and think about those aspects of that location and kind of develop a story in my head of, hey, this place at some point looked like this. Maybe it looked like that, what have you. And I've found that approaching things that way, it helps you develop those compositional choices, those stories that you want to tell with your photography, and just helps you see things a bit more clearly, if that makes sense.
And I think it makes a lot of sense. And it's fun to look around, and in a way, you can pick the flow that you want for a photo you're going to take. How you get that flow and how hard you have to try, how many times you have to visit, that's all up for debate. But you can kind of imagine, okay, if the water was high enough to cover this rock, it would go into this channel, it would make an island, it would do this or that. And I do think it's super fun to envision a flow that would maybe create an optimal photograph. And that's probably part of what makes the chase really rewarding for me, is if I'm finding high flows, that's probably near the level I needed to actually get the image. And if it's really high up its watershed where the creek starts at the top of the hill and we're not that far down, I'm going to have to work pretty hard to actually find water in the thing. And to me, I do like taking a picture of a creek with a lot of water versus just some damp rocks. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that that's a universal sentiment for sure. But, another thing too is, don't discredit low flow either, because I've found in going to different waterfalls, you take the bigger ones, for example, Canyon Falls, or, the whole Presque Isle River section. At high flow, they have one personality, but at low flow, they have a totally different personality. And depending on what your end goal is, those different personalities can really shape the scene and tell different stories. And I've found over the years that in some places, I like when the flow is a little less, while in others, you really need to have a big rain event to maybe get a full curtain of water across the face of the falls, or to maybe kick off a secondary falls that is adjacent to the primary. Whatever it might be, going back to that earlier point of going there, discovering these things and seeing them under different conditions, it's going to help you find what you want and ultimately understand the conditions that are required for you to do that.
And it's by visiting there, you're gonna get to know what those conditions are, because there is a wide range of variety amongst the rivers and the streams, and even broadly the landscapes you could photograph, at least especially in this region, but you could apply that to every region. So by going there, you learn some of the unique driving factors of that spot specifically. And with rivers, I guess you have to answer the question of, what am I trying to do here? Because for me, I'm trying to show off who this stream is, who this waterfall is. I'm not trying to imprint my definition of that. I'm trying to capture the essence. It'd be no different than taking a portrait and getting to know yourself, your subject, familiarize yourself with who they are, build that rapport. So maybe I get the authenticity of, if it's a human, the authenticity of the person I'm taking their portrait of. So if we apply that to creeks, and for me, that interests me, I want to show this thing off. without dictating what I think it is, what I think it should be. Now, I might envision, oh, it would be great to see with a lot of water. But if it's a little creek and it rarely has those flows, then finding a nice photograph at lower flows is probably capturing the way this creek presents itself 99% of the days of the year. So I love those high flow pictures. But if I can take a photo during the other volumes of water, they're going to present a more common perspective. And so for me to show off who this creek is means capturing it when it's covered in debris and covered in down trees, when it's got low flows. And it's a way harder photograph to take. It's a lot more challenging to find a nice image when there's hardly any water there. But every creek is so different that some of them look great with low flows. I'll joke about damp rocks because I find a lot of damp rocks. But there's also a lot of creeks that even at low flows present a million different views, and the water still channelizes. The water still makes a waterfall. And so how would you know what this creek does if you don't go there a bunch of different times? And maybe you're going to find that it's actually really nice the way it is at low flows. And maybe you love the photo you're going to take at low flows, but before you visited, you thought high flows was the key at that one too. And so maybe the moral of this is you got to go there either way. If you get your photo on day one, on visit one, like thank whoever you like to pray to because you got lucky. If you have to work for it, you're going to be rewarded with that when you finally do get the image. But how could you possibly know what the heck you're talking about if you don't go there?
Well said. It's very well said. And every single one of these in your book and every one that we visit in the book or outside of the book, it's applicable to every aspect of that. In, maybe you prefer the more defined look, maybe you like the high flow look, but you have to build that relationship and that understanding of that location to really appreciate it and discover what you want to say about it. And that's where your best work lives in my experience.
I would agree. And when I'm teaching the fundamentals of photography and sharing the stoke with people that are interested in growing in photography, I always tell them to follow your curiosity. And if you can find something you like, then that's going to guide you to the next thing. So you don't have to have all the answers, but if you have a little bit of interest and you are able to just aim towards the things that you see that you like, it's going to unfold in ways you couldn't have possibly predicted. So I like to use chasing your curiosity as the compass when everything else might be confusing. And how do I know where my voice is and where my style is in photography? Well, do you ever look at a picture and like something? All right, start there. What did you like? It doesn't have to be overly complicated. It can be your own photos. It can be other people's photos. What did you like? And then go from there. But you do have to look at things. So to find out what you like about these creeks, you might have to see them in a couple different styles.
Exactly. Very well said. Let your curiosity guide you, and you just take those little milestones one at a time, and you'll put the pieces together and you'll tell your story very well. It's the story of landscape photography, really. But before we close the episode out here, let's touch on real quick how many waterfalls are included in your book.
So I haven't counted up if you went to every entry how many you would see, but it's over 100. There's probably 40 or 50 entries, something like that. I didn't count exactly each one, but a lot of them are loaded with waterfalls where if you really wanted to see not only the entry, but a few extra, I'll add a paragraph mentioning a few additional ones further up the creek or in a creek next door, that sort of thing. So I do try to add on, even if it's not something where I'm going to make a specific entry about just this one little one, I'll lump it in to whatever the closest thing is just to make sure it's mentioned in there. So if you really were to go to everyone, it's quite a bit over 100.
For everyone that is going to be buying the book or is awaiting their copy, make sure that you explore a little, check out the region, check out the area, and follow the footnotes that he's talking about so you can find everything that he's put together here for us, and really excited to get out this spring and just start checking some of these places out, man. I know I speak for quite a few photographers when I say thank you so much for taking the time to not only find these places, but go through the effort of compiling them, putting everything together, and putting it out in the world for those of us that may not have the time to seek these things out every weekend like you do. So we can get up there and enjoy some more of these remote places that you spend so much time at, man. Huge thank you for that.
Well, I really appreciate that. And it's such a payoff for me to get to share these places with everyone that is interested. So, um, selfishly, I love that I get to see whatever you guys create with your photography. But man, do I love sharing it. And it's great that we're finally at this stage of, by the time this podcast is live and people are listening to it, the book is going to have been getting sold for a few weeks. And so it's a perfect timing to share these places and flip the tables. And now I get to see what everyone else is doing. But it's been a long time coming. It's been a fun project, and I just can't wait to share them and see what you guys think of some of my favorite places in the Upper Peninsula.
I'm excited to embark on these adventures, and excited to share with you what I find out there, and excited to see what everybody finds out there. All the different photographers that I've talked to that are awaiting their copy or going to be purchasing. Everybody's excited. Everybody's looking forward to the adventures ahead. So definitely exciting times, man. Thank you again for putting the book together, and huge thank you for coming on the podcast and talking with me about it, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. And what a fun topic to chat about.
Definitely.
Waterfalls and photography in the same podcast. Now we're talking.
Yeah, that's a winner in my book, man. What are some of your socials that so people can find you? And of course, I'll link them all in the show notes below so that people can get the book and check out your work.
The book is available at ringoproductions.com/shop. And the social media that I'm most active on is Instagram. And my handle on there is at river_darter. And a little background, it's actually like the name of a fish, but it also describes the literal version of what I'm doing. I dart between rivers, but it's also a little fish that's found itself in riffles and fast moving waters of streams, just like me. So at River Darter is Instagram. And then just Jake Ring on Facebook. You can add me as a friend if you want to. I don't post as much on Facebook. I tend to be more regular on Instagram. And between Instagram and my website, I think those are the two that I'm spending the most time on right now.
Awesome, man. Well, I will include all of those links in the show notes below so that all of you listeners can check it out. Go buy his book. Go have an adventure. Check out some of his posts on Instagram. There's some truly beautiful, wild, amazing places out there. And Jake, just thanks again for jumping on with me, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks again for having me. A lot of fun, as always.
An outstanding adventure through the Upper Peninsula and an outstanding guest. If you guys haven't yet, I highly encourage you to head over to the links in the show notes below, order up the book, check out some of Jake's work, and give him a follow. With that, we close out Season 1. I want to thank each and every one of you that has tuned in since January to enjoy the show. I also want to thank all of those who have been guests this season on the podcast. Your insights, your stories, your shared experiences have been invaluable. It has been such an outstanding experience and just a really fun, amazing time. I'm taking the rest of the year off to be with my family throughout the holidays and just take a break from things as we come into the new year. Next year, the show is going to have a few changes as well. I've enjoyed this journey of podcasting and bringing you guys along for the adventure, but I feel that a more visual approach is necessary to really give you the full experience. So, with that being said, in 2026, I'm going to be focusing more on YouTube and releasing podcast episodes monthly as I can. If you haven't yet, make sure to head over to my YouTube channel linked in the show notes below. Give it a follow so you can stay up to date on my latest adventures. But seriously, everyone, thank you all for an incredible year, an incredible journey, for all the love, kind words, and encouragement you've provided through messages and running into each other in the field. I cannot tell you how much it has meant to me. I cannot tell you how much of a joy it has been to do this. I wish you all a wonderful holiday season and the very best in 2026. I'll see you guys next year. I thank every one of you. Seriously, thank you so much. Take care, everybody.